Welcome back to Memphis Fire Department in-service training. Today we'll be discussing customer service. We have several objectives that will be covered in this module. They include differentiating between internal and external customers, implications of providing excellent customer service, documentation issues as they relate to customer service, operations of salvage and overhaul and how they implicate customer service, and finally we'll end with the difference between appearance versus intent, and we'll cover some issues as far as hospital destination guidelines for our customers. Again, welcome back to Memphis Fire Department in-service training. So what is the difference between internal and external customers? Well, generally, internal customers don't have a choice. They are our colleagues, other departments, or distributors that deal with us on a daily basis. External customers, however, call us for our services. They are our fire victims and our hospital patients. The following slide provides an example of our internal customers. So oftentimes it's not our happy customer that we have issues with, it's a customer that brings us a complaint. Please refer to the following video for some techniques on how to address customer complaints effectively.
Okay, so how do we deal with customer complaints? And in particular, in this video, we're going to go through the last model of dealing with customer complaints. But before we go into models or even techniques, let's go back at the very beginning and take a look at something called the adrenaline response. Okay, so I want you to imagine that you're a caveman and you're walking through the jungle a couple of million years ago, and boom, out jumps a saber-toothed tiger. Now the saber-toothed tiger has a pretty clear goal. It wants to eat you. Now, you don't have time to sit and think about it. You know, do I run to the left? Do I run to the right? What am I going to do here? Your body and your brain meld together instantly to either fight or flight, which is run. Okay, so our bodies are designed over millions of years. When we are in a high-pressure situation, we get an adrenaline response that tells us to fight or to flight. Which are these two here? Now, Let's have a think about that. In today's modern society, there's no room for fight or flight really, because we have to deal with civilized forms of communication. So if someone's yelling at you down the phone, or if they've come into the store and they're yelling at you, an appropriate response is not to run out of the store, and it's not to hang up on the customer, and it's not to smack them about the chops either. In today's world, we have to learn how to deal with the adrenaline response. But before we look at dealing with it, let's take a look at what it is. So, I want you to think about the last time you got into a bit of a dicey situation where maybe someone was yelling at you or threatening you. It may not have been at work, but a situation where you felt threatened. Now, what happens is adrenaline, which is a hormone that the brain produces, goes into your bloodstream, and it's a drug like any other drug. What happens next is your heart starts to beat. You start to breathe a little faster. You start to sweat. All of these responses start to happen. The blood flow goes through to your muscles because your body is saying, no, we don't need to think right now. We need action. And all of this is happening while you're sitting down on the phone or when you're standing talking to someone. Now, I want you to think about this. If your heart is beating fast and if you're sweating and if you're feeling nervous and you start to shake, do you think that that is a particularly good place from which to think? And of course, the answer is no. So you've got a customer who's come into you, they've complained and they've been quite aggressive about it in some way. You get the adrenaline response and you start to shake, your heart starts to beat, you start to sweat, and you stop thinking. So now what we have is a Muppet. We have a Muppet who is dealing with the customer. Now let's take a look at the customer. You've got the customer. Something has gone wrong. People don't like to complain. I mean, look, I'm sure there is the small percentage of the population that likes to complain, but on the whole, people don't enjoy going out of their way to make a problem. So the customer has had something happen to them that made them unhappy. What state do you think they are in? If I were to bet, I would say they're in an adrenaline response as well. So their heart is beating fast, they're starting to sweat, they're freaking out a little bit as well. So now we have two Muppets, and the Muppets are having a conversation. There is no way that an angry conversation between two Muppets can end in a positive resolution. So, what we've got here is, and this happens in any customer complaint scenario where you feel threatened or where the customer feels annoyed, we have two people who don't know how to think because they're currently under the throes of an adrenaline response, which is a drug that the brain has pumped into the bloodstream in order to give fight or flight. So, if you've had too many coffees, or if you've hit the booze a little hard, or indeed with adrenaline, there is nothing that you can do to make it go away faster. Contrary to popular belief, you can't eat food and then the alcohol or the caffeine will go away. The only way that you can remove a drug or a hormone from your bloodstream is time. That's it. Your body has to process it and get rid of it. There's no other way of it happening. So, again, in a customer service situation, you don't have the luxury of running out of the store or hanging up on the customer or anything else. You need to deal with the problem right then. So what is the one way that you can give yourself some time? Well, here's where we start coming to the last technique. So, step one is listen. If you listen to the customer, you're giving yourself time. You're just standing there absorbing what it is that they're giving to you, and it gives you time. It gives you time to calm down. It gives you time for the adrenaline response to reduce. It also has the benefit of giving the customer time to calm down because they're also in an adrenaline response. So you listening allows them to calm down. It allows you to calm down. And lastly, it gives you an opportunity to take in the information that you may need to solve the customer's problem. So at that point, the two Muppets have started to go back to being functioning adults and human beings because they've calmed down. Okay? At that stage, we can move to the next section of the last model, which is to acknowledge the customer. While all people have differences, we have differences in religion, financial status, where you live, all sorts of differences, we all have a few things in common as well. And one of those things that we all have in common is that we all want to be listened to and we all want to be acknowledged. We all want people to say, you know what, I get what you're saying. I may not agree with you, but I understand what you're saying. I understand where you're coming from. And that's acknowledgement. And acknowledgement is incredibly important when it comes to this because you have a customer who feels wronged. You have a customer that has come to you and has said, whatever it was that you did was not what I thought you were going to do, and I feel like I have been wronged. And the only way that you're going to be able to get them into a stage where they can talk to you and you can kind of get that to and fro where there's a bit of negotiation going on, the only way that can happen is if you acknowledge their point of view. So, at this stage, we've listened and we've calmed the situation down. We've acknowledged the customer so that they feel as though they're being listened to and that you understand where they're at. You're showing some empathy to them. Then and only then can we move to the third level, which is the solution. Now, I want to do a quick little comeback here. Quite often, you will know that you have listened correctly and that you have acknowledged correctly if the customer says to you something like, look, mate, I know it's not you. I know it's the way the company works. They will acknowledge you back. And that's a key indicator that you have done the first two steps of the last technique right, that you've listened and that you've acknowledged. And let's face it, if you acknowledge them, they acknowledge you, everyone's listening to everyone, now we're having a conversation. It's not really a complaint anymore, we're just having a conversation. They wanted an outcome, this is what they got, and now your job is to find out how to get them to the resolution that they wanted. The solution may not be the solution that they wanted. Another word that might be better might be resolution of some kind. You will not always be able to give the customer what they want. However, you should always give them a resolution and treat them with respect. And if you listen to the customer, and if you acknowledge them, they are far more likely to accept a resolution that isn't necessarily what they wanted. But if you don't listen to them, and if you don't acknowledge them, and then you try to give them a resolution that isn't what they wanted, you're going to get more fireworks. All right? And that's an absolute guaranteed. Now, at this stage you've listened. Everyone's calm, you've acknowledged, and so they feel that they've been listened to. Hopefully they've acknowledged you, so you feel like you're being listened to, and you've come up with a solution. At this stage, as you're closing off, so whether they're leaving the store or whether whether it's via correspondence or whether it's on the phone, the last thing you need to do is thank them. And there are a couple of reasons for this. One, it's just common courtesy. It's a nice thing to thank someone. They've taken the time to call you. They've taken the time. They've listened to you. Probably they've acknowledged you. They've treated you like an adult, and hopefully you've treated them like an adult. I think that truly positive communications in this world are quite rare. And if I have the luck to be part of a good communication, I think it's beneficial to everyone involved to thank them. And then maybe they'll do it again, at some stage with someone else. From another, I guess, more base point of view, it's just good practice. I would like it that a customer, as they're walking away from my company, that they walk away with a happy feeling that somebody's been polite and nice to them. All right? So whether you agree with it or whether you think, hey, I solved their problem, they should be thanking me, and by the way, they probably will. It is fantastic practice for you to thank them for being part of the call and for for working with you to get an amicable resolution for everybody. So, to be very clear, the first step is to listen. Calm everyone down. Acknowledge them. Acknowledge their issue and that you understand where they're at. Attempt to create a solution that solves their problem. And if you can't solve their problem, make sure that you give them a resolution that is fair. And at the end of the call or the interaction, thank them for their time and thank them for participating in an adult-like way so that everybody wins. And that is how you deal with customer complaints using the last technique.
To summarize using the last technique, first you listen. This often diffuses the situation and provides a calm platform for the customer to resolve their issue. Second, you acknowledge. This often changes the situation from a confrontational one to a conversational one. Thirdly, you solve their problem, and this often involves mutual effort between you and the customer. And finally, you thank the customer, and this provides a courteous and professional ending to their problem. Back in 2005, Memphis Fire Department issued a memo concerning the 3x3x3 rule. This rule was on the last EMS lieutenant's test. This rule was applied to any customer complaint that came through the Mayor's Citizen Service Center. The first portion of the 3x3x3 rule stated that any customer complaint would be at least addressed, if not solved, within 21 days or 3 weeks. The second component of the 3x3x3 rule was 3 areas to be addressed. These areas concerned the customer's complaint, actions or resolutions taken to solve the customer's complaint, and the completion date. The final portion of the 3x3x3 rule was to issue 3 written statements on each of the 3 components defined in this rule. A key component to the last technique is listening. Listening allows you to expand your discretionary time. It gives you an opportunity to contemplate the customer's problem, consider your options, and select the best solution. John Boyd, a famous fighter pilot, came up with the concept of the OODA loop. The OODA loop involves observation, orientation, decision, and action. Listening is essential for the first 2 components of the OODA loop, observation and orientation. Stephen Covey, famous for the 7 habits of highly effective people, illustrates the continuum of listening. This continuum of listening starts with ignorance and ends with empathetic listening. In the first 4 components of the continuum of listening, the listener is within their own frame of reference. It's truly at that 5th level that the listener attempts to step out of their frame of reference and listen from the perspective of the customer. Please refer to the following video for more on the continuum of listening.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
The following is a direct quote from Stephen Covey. To truly listen means to transcend your autobiography, to get out of your own frame of reference, out of your own value system, out of your own history and judging tendencies, and to get deeply into the frame of reference or viewpoint of another person. This is called empathetic listening. It is a very, very rare skill, but it's much more than a skill, much more. There are multiple components to consider when engaging in empathetic listening. They include being attentive, asking open-ended questions, asking probing questions, requesting clarification, paraphrasing, being attuned and reflecting feelings, and summarizing. Listening is a critical component of observation, but not the only element. Please complete the following activity. Although it mentions manufacturing, the skills it imparts are applicable to our profession.